to this month's episode of the 2025 Council Live series, The Power of Policy: How States Are Shaping the Future of Early Education. My name is Haley Brush, and I serve as the Government Relations Manager here at the Council for Professional Recognition. Today, we'll be walking through the landscape of state policy and how it's affecting early childhood and the CDA with Louie Lujan, the Council's Director of Government Relations. In this role, we oversee the Council's state and federal early childhood legislative efforts. As a team, we are your resource for all things early childhood policy and advocacy. So to get started, Louie, can you give us an overview of the current early childhood education policy landscape at the state level? What trends or themes are you noticing across states?
State and early childhood policy is busy and uneven. So here's what I see. First, budgets are moving, but not in one direction. Some states raised subsidy rates and eligibility, others trimmed or repurposed funds. Families do feel the difference. For example, Michigan's consolidation of early childhood funds is just one example that we can look at. It risks gaps in local coordination, in my opinion. Second, CCDBG remains the backbone. States are using it to sustain access, stabilize providers, and push quality. The pressure is still up because prices rose again in 2024. The annual average cost topped $13,000. Third, workforce is the make or break issue. I see basically three levers: wage supports and parity pilots, registered apprenticeship pathways linked to credentials, and scholarships. Texas shows the risk side, however. Teach scholarships that we all heard about recently paused and will not reopen until 2025, later in the year 2026. That shifts more load to employers and apprenticeships. Fourth, apprenticeships have gained ground. Lawmakers are writing bills now that formalize ECE apprenticeships and tie them to recognized credentials, including the CDA. We saw action in states like California and Illinois this year. The theme is earn and learn with portable credentials. Fifth, quality systems are being rebuilt. States are modernizing their QRS to focus on measurable practice, workforce competency, and equity. For example, North Carolina's rule package is a current case. And sixth, last but not least, subsidy rates are creeping toward the 85th percentile where budgets allow. That helps supply, especially for infants and toddlers. However, it's not universal yet. So the big picture, in my opinion, access is expanding in some places. Workforce supply is the binding constraint almost everywhere. States that connect CCDBG dollars, higher reimbursement, CDA aligned apprenticeships, and scholarships are holding ground. States that cut or reshuffle early childhood lines are seeing service gaps. So the lesson is simple: fund the seats, pay the people, and anchor the pipeline to competencies like the CDA.
Thanks, Louie, for those insights. So on to our next question. How are states integrating the Child Development Associate credential into their broader early childhood education frameworks or workforce systems?
So states are weaving the CDA into the core of their ECE systems. States are weaving the CDA in ways, for example, agencies write it into staffing and licensing for assistants and as a step to lead roles. QRIS awards points or higher tiers for CDA credentialed staff. Scholarship and grants pay upfront for coursework, assessment, and renewal. Registered apprenticeships align on-the-job learning and related instruction to CDA competencies, then stack credit towards degrees. Community colleges also award 6 to 12 credits for the CDA to shorten time and lower cost. Completion triggers wage steps or bonuses and count towards PD and licensure renewal. Workforce registries track CDA status, and contracts reward programs with higher CDA rates. So the formula is simple: name the CDA in rules, fund it up front, and give it credit towards degrees and tie it to wages. Now, I also want to mention that, several states also name the CDA through legislation, not just through guidance and rules. For example, in Maryland, HB 1441 created a 3-tier early childhood certificate and requires early childhood teaching assistants to earn and maintain the CDA by a certain date. In Louisiana, legislation requires certain lead teachers to hold early childhood the certificate, their version of the certificate. So a CDA is a qualifying path to their certificate, which makes a CDA a pathway to meet that mandate. So in Michigan, the assistant teacher standard requires a CDA. This is embedded in the state's program requirements and was authorized via legislation. And finally, in Washington, D.C., for assistant teachers hired with only a high school diploma, a rule requires earning the CDA within a 2-year period. DC law also ties pay steps into the CDA, which strengthens uptake. So you see the two situations there, not only through rules, but also through legislation.
Thanks, Louie. That's really helpful information. On to our next question. So, which states are leading with innovative or impactful ECE and CDA policy approaches, and what can others learn from their success?
So there are several examples of states that are taking the lead with innovative and impactful approaches. I can name a few. So the District of Columbia embeds the CDA in staffing rules. Assistant teachers qualify with the CDA or must earn one within 2 years. Louisiana links the CDA to the required early childhood ancillary certificate for lead teachers. The CDA is a direct pathway to that mandatory credential, which ties training to advancement. Michigan is another example. Michigan's pre-K sets a clear CDA bar for associate teachers. Therefore, programs know the standards and educators see a concrete entry level credential. North Carolina, just another example, is modernizing their QRIS to focus on practice and streamlined pathways. This includes updated rules, training, implementation tools that help programs align with coaching and credentials to qualify. We've all heard of New Mexico, just the first state in the nation to provide free childcare to all families, regardless of income. They also back the pipeline with wage supplements and pre-K pay parity. Education levels, including CDA attainment, trigger higher supplements and clearer wage ladder, which reduces turnover. So those are some examples. Last but not least, Illinois and California are pushing paid earn to learn. Illinois is funding apprenticeship expansion across all sectors. California is expanding paid work-based learning through AB 323 or Assembly Bill 323, which colleges can apply to ECE pathways. So both moves help embed the CDA align instruction with wages. So those are just some examples that I can give. And there's a lot more going across the entire country, but I think those are some of the highlights.
Thanks, Louie. Those are some really excellent examples of movements that are happening across the states. For our next question, I want to talk about the policy agenda, which the council recently updated. Can you share what prompted our update and how it reflects the evolving needs of the early childhood workforce?
So yes, I can. And our meetings with lawmakers, and this is where it all started from essentially, is we would have meetings with lawmakers, and we found that the feedback we were receiving was to make our policy agenda more streamlined. Now, our meetings with lawmakers usually last 10 to 15 minutes, and they juggle hundreds of issues daily. We saw a need for a fast, clear pitch based on their feedback. So we revamped the policy agenda for speed and readability while keeping the substance in contact or intact, I should say. The 4 pillars remain the same. First, CDA recognition and licensing. That's pillar number 1 of our policy agenda. Second pillar is the CDA career pathways through workforce programs and apprenticeships. The third pillar, CTE access, so high school students start on a CDA track. And then the fourth pillar, worthy compensation for ECE educators tied to credentials and roles. So in short, we kept the core of our policy agenda, cut some of the clutter, and built a version that legislators and staff can absorb in one sitting. So that was the reasoning behind it. We feel that our policy agenda reflects the evolving needs of the ECE workforce in several ways. Educators need quicker entry, paid on-ramps, and less red tape. We all know that. The agenda names the CDA and staffing and licensing, so entry jobs are clear. It backs prepaid scholarships and exam fees, so educators are not fronting the costs. And the policy agenda also ties the CDA to college credit, so time and training counts towards a degree. It also scales apprenticeships, so people earn while they learn. The policy agenda also supports bilingual and rural cohorts with coaching and flexibility delivery. It links completion to wage steps and pay parity pilots to keep talent. eliminate turnover. It aligns with QRAS, so practice growth shows up in ratings. It includes family, childcare pathways, renewals, and portability across roles. In short, the updates match what the field is asking for: faster access, funded training, stackable credits, real wages, and stable careers. And I also want to mention that we do encourage everybody to take a look at our policy agenda, which is available on the website. So far, the feedback we have been getting from the policy agenda from legislators' offices has been extremely supportive and encouraging. So we highly encourage people to take a look at it themselves.
Thanks, Louie. It's really great to hear all of that behind the scenes information about the policy agenda. And now on to our next question. How does the council influence or support state level policy development?
Yeah, great question. This is at the core of what we do as a team here in government relations. So we not only meet with state legislatures and legislators, we also meet with members of Congress on the federal level. We influence policy on both levels of government by first sharing our policy agenda. We provide draft language for bills and rules that recognize the CDA. We build partnerships and coalitions across all 50 states. We attend key committee hearings at both levels of government to brief, answer questions, and keep momentum going. We also submit comments on rule proposal changes, federal and state level. As an example, I met recently with the legislative staffer in Senator Raphael Warnock's office. She's a great ally for us on Capitol Hill. She shared plans rather to reintroduce one of their Pathways to Prosperity Act. It's a bill that had some legs in previous years. The bill creates competitive grants for community colleges to expand workforce programs and grow access to stackable, portable credentials in high demand fields. So this is a strong fit for early childhood. We plan to propose some language naming ECE rather as a priority sector and recognizing the CDA as a stackable credential into the bill. So we're going to hopefully work with that office to propose that language and get it inserted. So that link pulls a CDA into credit-bearing programs, apprenticeships, and wage steps. Bottom line, we bring a ready playbook to lawmakers where we bring a plan when we're at the table. Our agenda, we provide draft texts, partners, and testimony. Then we stay engaged throughout the process. So the CDA shows up in staffing, funding, and outcomes. So simply put, we get to the table and we have a plan and we have follow-up to make sure that the CDA is not only recognized, but that ECE policy is front and center.
Thanks, Louie. And one more question. How can our audience stay engaged with the council's policy efforts and help advocate for meaningful change in their own states?
Great question. So here's how you can not only stay engaged, but also drive change. You want to start with a connection. Subscribe, first of all, to our Policy Spotlight newsletter. There's a wealth of information, different ways to get engaged. You can track bills through different links we have in the newsletter. The newsletter is the place that I highly recommend you start. Next, follow our updates on social media, share them with your networks, invite a colleague to do the same. There's so much information out there, but we want to make sure that you're not only engaging, but that you're sharing it. Use our tools. Download the one-pager of our policy agenda that we mentioned earlier. There's a QR code you can share on the policy agenda that will take you right to our website, our policy website, which also has an interactive map. You can track bills. The map is like a heat map. You can scroll over the state you represent or are involved in, find out what legislation is going through that particular legislature. Keep it in your tool bag. Tell your story. 2 minutes on what the CDA did for your classroom or your career, or how your career is powerful because of it. Email your state senator and or congressional rep. Let them know what it is you're doing in the field. Share a story. And also copy us. Utilize our new and improved interactive policy map that I just mentioned. But you also want to, you want to keep us involved in the process so we can be a resource along the way. I always encourage hosting a visit. This is very powerful. Legislators will take you up on this offer most of the time. Invite them to your program. We can provide the talking points and key bills that you should be aware of. Support the pipeline. Stand up a CDA cohort with a local college or intermediary. Just basically get the legislators involved in the process. We want you to show up. We want you to, if the opportunity presents itself, testify at a hearing, submit written comments, There's lots of ways that you can get involved, build a local coalition, partner with key organizations. I mean, I can go on and on. I think the number one point to understand is that we are your resource on anything related to ECE legislation and policy across the states and the federal government. There's so many moving parts. We want you to become involved in the process, but have the confidence to know that we are here to support your efforts.
Thanks, Louie, for sharing your insights with our audience today. If you have any questions about state policy and how it's affecting early childhood education in the CDA, drop them in the chat and we will answer them across the next week. If you'd like to stay connected with the Council's advocacy efforts, please make sure to check out the Policy and Advocacy Pathways tab on the Council's website, where you can check out policies in your state and support our current campaigns to contact legislators. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Council Live, and make sure to tune in next month.